So guys, how's things? I'll just give it till about 3 minutes past just to give everyone a chance to get in before we start. Right, us 3 minutes past, so we'll crack on now. We'll just go over EU and AU this week's price action, how I saw it. Start on AU with the daily. Quick refresh the weekly, just a reminder of where we are. So obviously the weekly is pretty irrelevant for what we're doing, but it's always sort of beneficial to understand where price is sitting relevant to it. So the weekly's bullish, and then obviously have this entire range, take demand in it. So at this point, the most likely scenario is that we mitigate some within this range and then continue higher. Obviously, if this low goes, then we likely have switched bearish, and then we can potentially look for sales to target this low here. So that's the weekly. On the daily, then obviously the daily's bullish. This is the most recent break structure. We mitigated this high probability supply. You can see it swept liquidity. It took out this low here. We also had pretty decent inducement in front of it with this high. So no massive surprise that we saw a pullback from there. And then as you can see, we were bullish coming up here. And then once we sort of took out the high, struggled to close above the high there, had sweep liquidity, and then had the bearish IBOS, which obviously signals that the daily pullback is likely beginning. Obviously, when you're playing the swing pullback, you ideally want to be sort of getting in early in the pullback. So obviously, ideally, you want to be trading up here. As we sort of approach the EQ, it sort of gets lower probability to keep selling. You can see supply, pretty impulsive move there. No big deep pullback. Supply was being respected the whole way down. We've now come into these wicks here. Obviously, wicks aren't the best, but they are in the daily, so it is pretty significant. And then if you look below, you know, if we were to draw from that inside bar, you can see it was already tapped into by those wicks. So no massive surprise that we're getting a decent reaction from those wicks. You can see we had a bit of a pullback, but not too much really happened. It didn't go too far. So yeah, remains to be seen what'll happen. We could of course potentially continue the bullish daily trend from here, but yeah, no sign that the pullback's potentially complete yet. You know, had a bullish chalk there, but again, wasn't the most convincing. Um, yeah, you know, ideally you want to see a clear shift in order flow to sort of signal that the pullback's complete. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're sitting on the daily. 4H now. See, obviously 4 hour switch bearish to facilitate the daily pullback. And then we've just had these very clean price action. You can just see lower lows, lower highs, ranges being respected. Exactly what you want to see. Pretty nice trading conditions. I'll take this back to Monday. That's where we were coming into session. And yeah, so we had another 4 hour bearish break of structure. You can see it's not the cleanest price action. You know, here it was quite clean. You know, we're pushing down. Quite clear supply and demand zones in it. But here you can see things got slightly messier. We had a lot of wicks. Yeah, so we had the break structure. No massively clear unmitigated supply within this range. Probably would have just taken that there. So yeah, obviously coming into session on Monday morning, 4 hour bearish. Had a fair 4 hour break structure, so we could potentially see a deeper pullback. But then we had already pulled back into sort of the unmitigated supply within the range. So yeah, happy to sort of play it either way, depending on how things set up in the M15. If we got sort of clear signs of bullish intent, could potentially look for buys, but obviously not ideal to be buying against the 4 hour supply within the range. Then obviously it's valid to keep selling as well. If we keep seeing the signs of bearish intent on the M15. So M15 obviously coming into session, we're bearish. This was the most recent break structure. So had the break structure, had the pullback. I'm on. Yeah, I messed that up. That's Tuesday. Sorry. Have to go back further. So Monday, I think, was a bank holiday all across Europe. So obviously not ideal trading conditions, as generally with what we're trying to do is trade in line with the footprints left by the financial institutions. So if financial institutions are closed because it's a bank holiday, then you know it's less likely there's going to be any high probability setups for us. But it's less likely they still can present, so you still have to be on your game if you are trading it. So coming into session, see, swing was bearish. This is swing leg, and then this was the pullback. Again, this is where when I map my internal structure, I generally reset it following a break structure. You could view that as an IBOS, which would then mean that you didn't have a bullish IBOS until the price closed above that high. That's valid, but sort of whenever I come to the desk, I'm sort of I understand that this is the swing pullback. And what's most interesting to me is the most recent ranges, which you can see internally we're making higher highs and higher lows there. So that was what I was most interested in. Yeah, so it's valid to look for buys just following these ranges. Obviously it's more aggressive as they're buying against the 4 hour supply here. But yeah, on account of sells being sort of pro M15 swing and then sort of with mitigated 4 hour supply as well, did sort of overall favor sells. And we had, of course, already mitigated this supply, which was this was the unmitigated supply within the range. As you can see, everything above was mitigated. That candle was tapped into by that wick, and that candle was tapped into by that wick. So if the bearish trend was to continue, in all likelihood, it was going to continue from this supply. And you can see we had a decent reaction failed, another reaction failed, which is potentially a sign of bullish intent. But yeah, as I said, not ideal to be buying against the 4 hour supply. Play it on, kept pushing up. Didn't quite mitigate this PY here to potentially look for a buy. Now you can see we swept this high. So obviously following a liquidation, what do we want to see happen? We want to see the PBL fail. So the M15 PBL was just there at the yellow box. So in terms of, at this point, it is valid to look on the M1 for an entry, for a liquidity entry model, but you just want to be careful of trading against the M15 PBL because again, price could just pull back into this demand and push higher. So for that reason, the safest bet here is always going to be to wait for the PBL to fail. But yeah, you know, in some cases, and depending on your own risk tolerance, that may be too conservative for you, and you may want to be more aggressive. So in terms of an M1 entry, you can see the M1 PBL could have just taken this whole range. Again, how aggressive you want to be with your M1 PBL completely depends. It's up to you. To me, in this instance, it makes the most sense to just take that range or M1. So obviously that M1 PBL is nested within the M15 PBL. The M1 shock is here, so obviously we need to see that there for the entry model as well. So now we've had the M15 liquidation, we've identified the M1 and the M15 PBL, and now we just want to see if the other components of our entry model set up. So let's put it on. Yeah, so you can see the M1 PBL held. So no entry there. So at this point, if you want to see an M1 liquidity entry model, you need fresh liquidity to be built in the face or in the form of equal highs or a fake chalk. Now here, there are pretty clean equal highs, so that is sufficient for a strong liquidation. M1 liquidation. So in this case, your PBL, just take that whole range. So yeah, the chalk line is here. So obviously we need to see that go as well. So now we just want to see what sets up. Did we mitigate the PBL? The high is 409, the low is, yeah, so we did top into the PBL there and pushed higher. So again, need to see fresh liquidity built if you're looking for a strong liquidation. Again, this is where you get some questions where it's, you know, can you refine your PBL to here and sort of say, right, well, it hasn't tapped into the PBL yet. Yeah, that's valid if you want to do it that way. But for me, price tap back into the range, pushed higher. I'm happy enough to say that the PBL did its job there. And yeah, play it on here. Yeah, so now we start to get signs of bearish intent on the M15. Yeah, at this point, having sort of not had strong liquidation in M1, we've now pulled back into the M15 PBL. I'd be inclined to wait for at least an M15 chalk. So the chalk is at the red line. That would obviously line up with the PBL failing. Have to be aware of the fact that internal range is still here. So we may just chalk bearish, mitigate this demand and continue higher. However, you just have to weigh everything up. You've built the story, M15's bearish, we've swept this high, we're in 4 hour supply. So it all depends how aggressive you want to be. Now we've pushed in this demand. Don't think there was an entry. No, you can see in this case the chalk line was all the way up here at that inside bar. So obviously a lot would have to happen for us to get the entry model from this demand. That's obviously pretty clear equal lows. So were we to come down here and sweep them, then you could look for the other components of the entry model and potentially look for a buy, while one to be careful of trading against that M15 supply. But unfortunately, there was no entry model, just kept pushing up. And you can see here, we just missed the refined M15 supply as I had drawn it. So there's no potential entry there for me. Again, you could use a bit of discretion and sort of adjust your zone to there, in which case there was a mitigation. That's sort of where you can get caught out over refining your POIs, and sort of given the overall area, you might want to just be a bit more aggressive and sort of being aware of the fact, right, it tapped the last sell or last buy before the sell, so you may want to look for an entry. But again, there was no massively clean entry model. You can see prices sort of shot up and then sort of came straight back down. So no clean entry model there for me. Now, obviously with this low feeling, which was the protected internal low, as you can see, that was sort of the most recent internal leg. So now the price has spiked through that. Sells are even higher probability. Everyone's sort of lining up at this point. We have trend line liquidity there that we can target. So if you just look at this here, you had sort of the impulsive move down and then the corrective move back. So it makes sense that the next leg is going to be the downside. We've now had a bearish M15 shock, the demand range is failed, and we also have this flip zone. So the obvious place to look for an entry at this point was this flip zone. So just one price to pull back in there and then look for sells. But unfortunately, price just sold off quite aggressively without pulling back in. And yeah, that was pretty much a London session. So there wasn't really any clean M1 entry models on it, but yeah, the M15 played out quite nicely, but just pretty tricky to get involved in the M1. Yeah, so that's really all I will say about London. And then coming into New York, again, obviously favor sells, swinging internal, both bearish. We just about got the close below this low. So this is sort of the most recent internal supply range. So the obvious place to potentially look for sell was just here, while being wary of the fact that, you know, yes, swept behind that inside bar, but it's not the cleanest sweep. You know, you want to see something sort of more significant than that. So there was also the possibility the price could have come up to the supply, the flip. But as I said at the start, it's just it's a bank holiday in the US as well as Europe. So the New York session was also likely to be quiet. And as you can see, price pretty much just trickled down for the duration of the session. Again, I'm happy enough to leave this sort of price action alone and wait for something cleaner. You can try and trade it if you want. Like, look, we know swinging and turns bearish. We know it's likely as high is going to get run. You can see price trickling down, respecting supply. But yeah, I'm just happy enough to leave it. And then of course had this demand drawn on. But at most that was only likely to be a minor reaction point, as this low was weak as it failed to take out the swing high, and also the internal had switched bearish, which meant it was always likely to run. So I had no real interest in looking for a buy from there unless we sort of got a clear shift in order flow. So that was pretty much Monday. Nothing too exciting there. And then, apologies, I actually covered the 4 hour from Tuesday on Monday. I got my days mixed up. But yeah, coming in Tuesday in the 4 hour, we had the, as we know, got the bearish break structure, and we pulled back into the 4 hour supply within the range. So yeah, favorite sells again. If they lined up in M15, wasn't too keen on buys just because we were sort of buying against the supply within the range, and we hadn't mitigated the daily demand down here. Which again, if something's going to change, if these 4 hour ranges are going to fail and something's going to, you know, change, then it's probably going to be this daily and 4 hour demand down here that does it. So happier to keep selling to potentially target down here as opposed to sort of buying against the 4 hour supply. So go to M15. Right, so this coming into London, swinging and turn is bearish. This is our swing break structure, and for me, this is the most recent relevant internal range. So in terms of supply and demand, potentially look for a continuation. Obviously, the extreme is always the best. Then we had this little zone here, which again, decent POI, swept liquidity behind that little high there. It's where the supply came into the market that caused the IBOS on the break structure. So decent POI. Yeah, I'll just draw on the premium versus discount to see if it's well priced also. Yeah, it's in the discount. That's sort of the main negative confluence. But yeah, still could play out, so still worth keeping an eye on. Obviously, no inducement. So you want to wait for a minimum of strong liquidation on the M1. So yeah, still hadn't quite mitigated the 4-hour demand, which was obviously just below here. So was still cautious looking for buys. Was aware that even if we did sort of get a bullish chalk here or signs of bullish intent, that it was probably just building liquidity for down here. So was very cautious looking for buys. If we play it on, see now we got the bullish chalk. Again, it's only a chalk. You know, chalk is the most aggressive form of structure mapping that we use. And we understand that, yes, it's a bullish chalk, but we may just pull back into the fresh demand and continue higher. So if you want to trade following the chalk, you can, but it's a lot more aggressive, and you understand this likely just facilitate the pullback up to mitigate supply. And personally, the fact that we didn't mitigate the 4-hour demand, this just felt like a trap to me. So personally, I had no real interest in trading this. Obviously, you can't argue there's a flip zone there. Well, it's not that you can argue, there is a flip zone there. As I said, no strong liquidation. So yeah, personally, I was happy to be cautious here and focus largely on sales until something sort of changed. Play it on. So yeah, you can see we pull back again, flipped in sweep. So you could have just taken the extreme. So you may still want to look for an entry from just the extreme, but I don't think on a reset up. Yeah, that's the M15 inside bar. So you could say that's your M15 inducement. And then, yeah, you could say the PBL did technically fail there, depending on which one you take. But as I said, the overall area just wasn't that favorable, just given the overall price action. So nothing there for me, and I think price just, yeah, eventually tanked lower. So again, the perfect entry model, as we all say, is nigh on worthless unless it is used in the right area. So now got another M15 IBOS, obviously swept liquidity here. So you can't keep looking for sells. Now we've mitigated the 4-hour demand. So it is more aggressive to keep selling against the 4-hour demand, is obviously if the M15 trend is going to change, it's likely going to be a higher time frame POI that is the catalyst for that. And in this case, we have mitigated the 4-hour demand. So you can keep selling here if you want, but it is just more aggressive to do so. Again, definitely wouldn't be leaving an M15 risk entry here. Yeah, just it's low in the M15 leg. You know, we're in the discount. Yeah, just definitely wouldn't be leaving a risk entry here. And obviously because we've mitigated the 4-hour demand as well. Play it on. See, blast it up. I don't think there's anything resembling an M1 entry there. Mitigate the POI. So there was the fake chalk there, and then we got the strong liquidation here. But you can see price just pulled back into the PBL and pushed higher. So no potential entry there. So at this point, we've had the 4-hour demand mitigation. We know it's possible that it's likely that's going to be a catalyst for at least a deeper pullback in the M15 and potentially, you know, potentially a 4-hour pullback as well, which would obviously see the M15 switch bullish. So we've played on. Now we've got the M15 IBOS, so that's a pretty decent signal that the M15 pullback is starting. So obviously the POI, if you want to consider buys, the POI to look for is for price to pull back in there and then continue higher. And there is that flip zone there, but you know, it didn't sweep liquidity, no inducement. It's very unlikely, you know, it's pretty much just wicks. So it's very unlikely that that's going to produce a reaction. M15 swing still bearish, so can look for sells from here, here, or even potentially up here, as this is the M15 swing high. So yeah. So mitigate there. I can see we got a bit of reaction. Again, don't think there was an entry model. Yeah, there's no strong liquidation in the entry model. So we got the chalk. So again, you could have looked to play that, but there's no liquidity entry model. It's a lot more aggressive. As we said in the M15, there's no inducement from the POI. So yeah, you definitely want to wait for a strong liquidation in that regards. Now, obviously, we've another flip zone. So we've a huge amount of bullish momentum at this point coming off the 4-hour demand. So at this point, buys do make sense. We have mitigated the premium, but the 4-hour demand mitigation is a huge consideration here, in that it was always possible that the M15 could switch bullish, given the amount of momentum coming off it. So yeah, still can look for sells from here or buys from here, if the entry model presents. So let's see what happens as we tap into that zone. Again, no inducement, so would want to see a strong liquidation. Yeah, no strong liquidation there. You can see, yeah, price just respected demand the whole way up. So we've got a chalk here at that low. So again, if we got the high here, if you got the liquidation here, and then the PBL fail, etc., you could look for a liquidity entry model. Is during the London lull as well, so I wouldn't really recommend doing this, but we'll just mark it up for argument's sake. So we had this strong liquidation. PBL, pretty much that whole range, depending on how refined you want to be with it. Yeah, and then you can see the PBL held literally to the micro pip. So that's the power of understanding the the liquidations in PBL. Yeah, it is an incredibly powerful tool. So yeah, that supply now failed. Didn't pull back into this zone to potentially look for a buy. So no buying opportunities. And now again, we had this POI. This was coming in New York, I believe. Yeah, so we had these two POIs at the extreme. This is our strong M15 swing high as it caused this break structure. So completely valid to look for a sell from here. Just you have to understand that we've mitigated the 4-hour demand and we've had a pretty hyperbolic V-shaped recovery. So at this point, particularly with how the 4-hour was looking, you can see on the 4-hour, we had this, we mitigated the demand, and then we had this huge wick and the huge, I think it's a morning star candlestick formation when you have sort of a low test candle followed by sort of an engulfing candle after it. So on the 4-hour, very strong candlestick formations at this point. Yeah, buys were a lot lower probability, even though the M15 was bearish. And this is where you have to understand sort of multi-time frame analysis and where that comes into the equation. Just because the M15 is bearish, don't be completely welded to sells. Sort of understand, what's happening in the 4-hour as well. Now, were some potential entries here? Yeah, so this was the first potential one. It was right at the start of the session. Had your equal highs. So had our liquidation. PBL was here. M1 chalk was here. So yeah, it completely meets the criteria for a liquidity entry model. You can enter right on the extreme there. It's a tricky one. It's a very small candle, so you may just want to take a bit more of the range to give yourself a higher probability of getting tagged. As you can see, probably would have been stopped out there pretty quickly. But yeah, a completely valid liquidity entry model. But again, just have to understand that sells were more aggressive considering the bullish momentum and based on the 4-hour demand mitigation as well. And then there was another potential entry model here. See, we took out this high, which called the bearish chalk. PBL is obviously here. You can see we pull back into the PBL, try to push up. Looks like the reaction is going to fail. And then, yeah, obviously the flip is the obvious place to enter. Again, completely valid liquidity entry model, but in this case, it would have been another quick loss, which is all good. And yeah, now we've had the M15 bullish break structure. We had the close above. So you could potentially look for a liquidity entry model following break structure. But personally, a lot of bullish momentum, bullish break structure, 4-hour demand mitigation at this point. For me to want to look to play pullback at this point, I would want to see a bearish chalk, which was down here at the inside bar. So yeah, at this point, pretty much just waiting for more development. Had this POI, just run through sort of the POI selection in this range. So M15 is switch bullish, so potentially want to look for buys. With this POI here, really not the best. No lid, didn't sweep liquidity, and it's in the premium. So wouldn't have any real interest in trading that there. I would want to see a clear shift in it in M15 order flow before looking to trade that. Obviously here we have the flip zone, no inducement, didn't sweep, but it's in the discount. You can see clear flip zone reacted to this POI here. So we'll consider an entry model from there, and obviously ideally was the extreme, but again, it's unlikely that this is going to play out yesterday. And then obviously following the bullish break structure, I can expect to play the pullback, but would want to see a bearish M15 chalk before considering any buys. So we'll play it on and see what way things played out. All right, so now we've had the bearish M15 chalk. We've mitigated this low probability demand. So at this point, I'd still be happy to look for sells. Obviously, the extreme is ideal. So expecting this to most likely just be a reaction point to mitigate supply to continue lower. So yeah, mainly interested at this point, sells from the extreme and buys from either of these POIs in the discount. That was pretty much how I was looking to approach things. You can see there's no M15 lid or anything here to potentially even look for like a liquidity entry model. There was M5 lid where you could have looked for where price basically swept this high. And obviously that was the M5 PBL. This was in the New York markup yesterday if you want to check it out. And then had the M5 chalk. So you would have been tagged in on the extreme, sort of all in the one candle. So yeah, it was a potential M5 entry there if you want to use M5 lid. Again, pretty aggressive. There was no M15 supply mitigation really. Yes, you're reading between the lines following the bearish M15 chalk that it's likely we're going to see the pullback. Swept M5 lid, which is better than nothing, but it was quite aggressive, and it was just, I think it was about half an hour before news as well. So personally, I don't want to be entering trades that close to news just because what's the expectation? Like if you're opening a trade 30 minutes before news, like what are your expectations? Like, do you want price to absolutely tank and hit your profit target before news? It's very unlikely that's going to happen in 30 minutes, particularly as before major news, price does have a tendency to just sort of range around and not really go on here, which you can see is pretty much what was happening here. And then eventually it came up with the news, it came up and swept on it. But yeah, there was the potential M5 entry there. And as I said, on the M1, I would have been waiting for the extreme and had no interest in trying to buy from here either, as it was a pretty low probability POI. So yeah, that was New York yesterday. Pretty clear cut price action. Identified the POIs that I want to trade from. Got the M15 shock. Was considering a sell from here, but just couldn't get involved in on them. So that was yesterday. Now let's go to today. So obviously 4 hours still bearish. Yes, we had this sort of huge wick, pretty decent amount of bullish momentum, but 4 hour was still bearish. The range was still holding, and then coming into session, you can see we had a pretty decent amount of bearish momentum as well. So yeah, 4 hours still bearish. So overall, the expectation was that price was going to run this week low. Go down 15 now. So yeah, coming into London, M15 swing was bullish. So could have potentially looked for a buy from the M15 extreme, but as we saw in the 4 hour, we're still sort of, yes, the M15 switch bullish, but we're still sort of contained in the 4 hour range, the 4 hour supply. So personally, I was happy to be cautious looking for buys here, and was happy to wait for sort of a clear shift in order flow where you can see sort of demand being respected. And as you can see, still had supply being respected here. So come in and yeah, pretty much just smashed through that demand. Again, wouldn't really encourage looking for liquidity entry models running following this sweep just because, or following the brick structure, just because when you're trading counter M15 trend, just wait for the shift in order flow. You can see this price action, it wasn't the cleanest. There was a lot of wicks. It's not clear sort of higher highs, higher lows, or lower highs, lower lows, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, pretty messy price action. So following the break structure, basically wanted to see a clear bullish shift in order flow like an M15 shock, and ideally a strong liquidation to potentially look for buys to pay the pullback. And then in terms of sells, all this price action was very messy. So all I was really interested in at this point was either of these two POIs here for looking for continuations, which obviously that's going to take a long time for price to get up there, which isn't ideal. But yeah, pretty much just sitting on my hands at this point. I wanted to see sort of a clear shift on the M15 to potentially look for buys to play the pullback. Was my favorite sort of idea. Let's see here. There was absolutely nothing on the M1 during London, so there's no point even really dropping down, to be honest. Just after London session, during the London lull, we got the bullish M15 shock. No strong liquidation, and this M15 POI that I had drawn on didn't have lid. So was it? Yeah, it was this in here. It didn't have lid, so you can see here. So for that reason, I was sort of reluctant to look for buys solely after the chalk, just because I thought that having failed to mitigate this M15 demand, you can see we just reacted before it. I was thinking that this could maybe be the PBID where you had the fake chalk and the price would then smash the liquidity, and then we might see the deeper pullback. So I was somewhat reluctant to look for buys at this stage. And see, got the bearish or the bullish chalk, pull back into the demand. And then see, start to see signs that demand was being respected. Again, could potentially look for buys here. Like you can see, we've had the pullback into demand and pushed higher, so you can see demand starting to be respected. Again, the main reason I was sort of reluctant to buy here was just the fact we hadn't mitigated the refined POI and the fact we hadn't had a strong liquidation. I was happy enough just to leave it alone, to be honest. Drop down to that one and see if there's any entries from this POI. You can see we haven't quite mitigated the M15 demand yet. So yeah, we pushed up. At this point, you can sort of read between the lines and consider this range mitigated. As you can see, we had the range mitigation and price pullback and mitigated and continued higher. So it's valid to wait for that demand, but you have to sort of understand that when the range is mitigated, it's likely the majority of the orders are filled up within it. And then after that, to be honest, price action got a bit messy. Yeah, it's typical news day price action where prices sort of kept trickling up a lot of wicks. It wasn't really ideal where you wanted to get involved. The only place I would have really been potentially interested was here. So then you can see once price started to produce wicks and all, it's just messy. Absolutely no interest in. Look, I know some people are trying to sell from POIs in here. If a POI doesn't hit you in the face, in that it's glaringly obvious, like this one here is a glaringly obvious POI. As you can see, we swept liquidity there. A lot of supply come in the market. That's the sort of POI you want to be trading from. If you have to go searching for a POI here, where there's lots of wicks, lots of mitigations, it's likely not that good a POI. So personally, you're in the discount of the range as well. Let me double check this. Yeah, you're in the discount of the range. Very, very, very low probability of trying to sell from those POIs. Again, if you're not sure, just wait for an M15 order flow shift and then let the M15 show its hand. So yeah, valid to play buys, to play the pullback following the chalk and demand starting to hold, but then with no strong liquidation would mitigate the refined M15 POI. Just not the best. And then yeah, no real interest in trading those supply zones. And see what way news went. Yeah, see now you can see how corrective that whole push up was. It's like you said, there was no strong liquidation. So this move was to effectively just build liquidity for the strong liquidation. And as you can see, now we've had the strong liquidation. So now it's probable that we'll see the maybe a deeper pullback. So yeah, you know, when nothing's massively clear, you don't need to force it. Like you can see there, there's no real bullish momentum. Price just trickling up, lots of wicks, messy price action. There's no need to try and trade that. Yes, it makes sense to play the pullback following the bullish chalk. You know, we had the break structure, etc. But it's just no need to force it. So yeah, that's obviously the M15 PBL. So it will be interesting to see if that fails. But yeah, all in all today in EU is just very messy price action. Nothing massively clean in that leg or in that leg. Now that we've had strong liquidation, I would say hopefully we'll have something cleaner to work with coming into session tomorrow. So that is EU for this week. Pretty quiet week for me. I don't think I took any trades. I didn't take any trades. But yeah, a lot of patience pays in the long run. I'll now do a quick look at AU. As I always say, I'm not actually trading this pair anymore. I would encourage everyone to not really bother trading it, to be honest, because it's a frustrating pair. You just don't get the entries on it. You know, the structure plays out quite nicely, but it just doesn't really mitigate the POIs, and it doesn't give the clean entry models that EU does. So if you're trading the M1, I would encourage you to trade one pair, just stick to EU, because you have to understand, if you're trading two pairs, particularly in the M1, like it takes a lot of concentration. You have to be on the ball to trade the M1 because, you know, an entry might set up in a couple of minutes. So you need to be there. You need to be on the ball. If you're splitting your attention across two pairs, particularly a pair that does not perform as well as your main pair, the opportunity cost of that is massive, because it's easy to be caught daydreaming, looking at AU, and a setup plays out in AU, and it's just the opportunity cost is not there. And you know, if you miss a good setup in an AU and then don't get involved in an AU, it's like you're just massively shooting yourself in the foot. If you're trading the swing strategy, then yeah, you can trade two pairs with it. But I would encourage you to trade GU if you want to do that, because again, AU just doesn't respect the supply and demand. Valid lid. Can we see an example of lid with inducement on the 15-minute, please? We see a lot of no lid. Lord, it's just a structural high. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. That's the perfect example there. That little high there. It's an M15 structural high right in front of the POI. That's it. That's all you're looking for. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Once it's a pullback in M15 and it's reasonably close to the POI, then that is all you're looking for. Right, so AU daily, swing and internal bearish. ultimately expecting this low to go. You can see had this messy range pullback, but then we broke out of that and had another bearish eye boss. And yeah, again, fully expecting these ranges to hold and price to run this week low. We come into this daily demand, it's weekly demand as well. So I'd say it's very likely that this demand is going to be a catalyst for at least a decent internal pullback. So I would say eventually from this POI, we'll see a pullback to within this range before the next leg to the downside. So yeah, that's the daily. For our is obviously bearish. Take this back to Monday. So come into the daily demand. So obviously we're aware we may see a deeper pullback in the 4 hour. However, need to be cautious, sort of looking for buys because supply was still holding with no bullish chalk. So ideally wanted to see supply fail before looking for buys. So you can see we had this leg down, we pulled back into supply, tried to push down, and now it looks as though the reaction is going to fail. So that's a pretty decent sign that right now we may be seeing the catalyst. So obviously have this demand here. Had the bullish chalk as well, but this is where chalks can be quite tricky because yes, it was a bullish chalk, but it also could be viewed as a liquidity sweep. So ideally you want to see sort of more commitment than that as opposed to just a wick break. But it's a valid chalk, it's a valid liquidity sweep. We don't know which is going to be. You know, price could pull back into this demand, which caused the chalk, and then push higher, or the sweep of liquidity could be a sign of bearish intent, and we could come lower. But obviously, we don't know which that's going to be. Now drop to M15. Yeah, coming into session, M15 had switch bullish, got the close above here. So was happy to look for buys in anticipation of sort of catching the 4 hour swing pullback. This was the obvious demand to look for an entry. It's at the extreme of this range, so it's logical the price will pull back in here and continue higher. Head on. Yeah, we did this is the bank holiday again, so we did eventually pull back in here. Not sure if there was an entry model. Yeah, there was no liquidity entry model because we had these equal lows, but the PBL held. And again, if you just take the range as PBL, it's logical. We liquidated the low, pulled back into that range and continued lower. So there was no liquidity entry model there. Obviously had the strong liquidation here as well. Swapped the low, yeah, but there's no really clean entry model there. Then coming towards the end of London, see we got a bullish M15 shock as well. So got a look for an entry here. And this demand again makes complete sense. Swinging internals, both bullish. I've had a bullish M15 shock. We've mitigated this demand at the extreme of the internal range, so logical to expect price to pull back in here and continue higher. Again, bank holiday, low volume, far from ideal. See, we just missed the POI originally. Then we formed a bullish II boss, whatever you want to call it. So again, it's valid to look for an entry from the extreme of that range. There was, if you take these as equal lows, then there was a strong liquidation. Had the PBL fail, flip, chalk, so you could have entered and not flip there. Pretty tricky one. I'm not sure. It seemed to just miss the range. You probably wouldn't have been tagged, but that was valid. Then, as you can see, price just came down and then swept obviously the low into the extreme POI. But again, we've had the pullback into demand, tried to push up, and we sort of failed. It's a bank holiday, low volume. And personally, I wasn't looking for any trades at this point. But yeah, you could have looked for the liquidity entry model following the sweep, but don't think I'm set up on it. Yeah, you can see with no strong liquidation there. We've left equals, but that's outside session hours. Now coming into Tuesday. So M15 swing was bearish, had the break structure here. Internal, kind of this an internal break, so internal is bearish as well. Obviously, if this high goes, then we can look for buys as the internal switch bullish, which is likely to facilitate the swing pullback. Yeah, so let's just see what happens. See, we're in the 4-hour demand as well, which caused sort of price to spike to high, which again, it's valid demand, but it only caused price to wick the high. It could be a liquidity sweep, which isn't ideal. So could look for sales from here or ideally here and buys if we got the bullish IBOS. Let's see what happens. So yeah, got the bullish IBOS, had this obvious flip zone, but price didn't quite pull back into it. Pretty strong recovery, V-shaped recovery. Obviously still have the supply at the extreme to look for sells. We had the liquidity sweep in the 4-hour. I'll just see. You can see we swept that high there. So yeah, valid look for sales in the extreme, just a lot of momentum, which is always sort of a bit of a warning sign. And obviously no lid in front of the POI, so want to see a minimum of a strong liquidation on the M1, if not on the M15. That was pretty much London, got the bullish IBOS, didn't pull it back into demand, and then sort of just shot the upside, didn't mitigate any supply that I want to look for a continuation from either. So that was pretty much the London session. So if you want to trade during the London lull, you could have been looking for an entry here. Again, it's not something I recommend doing if you're executing the M1, particularly on AU, as AU seems to be a lot quieter during the lull, even compared to EU. Now, we have liquidated the high. It's a strong liquidation as there was a chalk there at that inside bar. So now we have a strong liquidation. The M15 POI, which sort of is a nice, we had no lid. So you want to see a minimum of an M1 strong liquidation, see an M15 one, it's even better. So at this point, can drop down to the M1. Again, this is pretty just typical AU price action the way this plays out. You can see our M1 PBL is here. You can see it held, that had the liquidation there, pulled back into the PBL and pushed higher. Again, equal highs here. Take them out. Pull back into the PBL. PBL holds, so no strong liquidation, and then in true AU fashion, it just absolutely tanks without giving an entry model. Which is just as typical what happens at AU, it just doesn't give the entry models. You can see we just swept that. It isn't even a strong liquidation there, as it didn't cause a chalk run, and then price just absolutely tanked. And then that was pretty much it during New York. Had the bearish M15 IBOS and PBL field. So at this point, everyone's aligned for sells, potentially looking for price to pull back in there to look for an entry. But yeah, price just absolutely tanked for the duration of New York. So yeah, I was new AU yesterday, and then we'll just do today as well. So we had AU news overnight, which explains this sort of large wick. So you swept lots of liquidity behind these highs and then pushed lower. Got the M15 break structures. We had a new range to trade within. My main thought process here was pretty much wanted to sell from here and possibly here. Selling, like you can see, price just sort of trickling down. Usually after a news announcement, price does retrace the majority of the move. So at this point, it was pretty much waiting for a sell from here and for like a clear shift in order flow to potentially look for buys, sort of play the aggressive pullback. That's what I would have been looking for. But as you can see, supply just kept holding. Swept the high in there. There was a couple of entry models in there, but again, you would have taken the loss and not got involved in the win. Let's see here, we took out this high here, PBL, flip, fail. We already had the chalk up here, so perfectly valid enter there. But as you can see in this case, would have been a quick loss. And then when we got sort of clear liquidation, the M15, you can see just tanked. It's like, it's pretty much not possible to get involved unless you're taking full ranges. You know, you would have to have entered pretty much on that range with a 6 pip stop to get involved there, which again, with EU, the main difference between the two is EU has a tendency to respect sort of the supply and demand, the extreme of the ranges a lot more. So yeah, there was potential entry there, but keep pushing down. Had this as an IBOS, so obviously could have kept following the bearish order flow if you pull back in here, but in true AU style, didn't quite mitigate the zone and then pushed down. So I mean, another bearish M15 IBOS. In this case, coming up news, left clear liquidity there. So at this point, it's pretty likely the price is going to come up here, mitigate that, and then continue lower, as that is just pure liquidity building there. So wouldn't have any interest in trying to trade within this range, to be honest. Just going to counter the equal highs behind, and then, you know, this is still our M15 swing high, so we're still trading in the discount, which isn't ideal. And yeah, you can see with the news, swept the liquidity, came up here. Yeah, fortunately, I can't imagine there being an entry there. Yeah, nothing clean on it. And as I say, I think news was at 3, so it was immediately before news, so not a time to be placing an entry in M1. So that's a pretty typical week in terms of AU. It just doesn't give the entries, which is the main reason why I don't bother trading it anymore. I prefer focusing on AU and GU with the M5. Does anyone have any questions about that, or any questions about anything else before we wrap it up? No questions, guys. Right then, well, thanks very much for your time on it, guys. Thanks for listening as always. I'll try and get some mindset stuff or something done up for next week just for a change, because I think these just the price action reviews can be quite monotonous at times. I know I sort of rather do back testing or mindset with them, but it's good to sort of mix them up. Well, thanks very much for listening on, you guys. If you have any questions on it, just hit me up in the Discord and I'll get back to you. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good evening, and I'll chat to you soon.